you are working at Google.
Yes.
So that's a huge company. It's one of the biggest companies in the world, making enormous amount of money. Where do you actually work? Because it can be everywhere. Tell us a little bit about where it actually is.
I actually work in the main campus in Mountain View, which is about an hour from San Francisco in California. And yeah, like I'm really lucky because Google has offices all over the world. And I happen to be working in the main campus, the original one.
And tell us a little bit about what kind of people are there. What kind of mood is there? Bring us a little bit to your workplace.
Sure. Let's see. How to explain Silicon Valley.
It's important
well, I mean,
that you
especially at Google, right?
Yeah.
So
from
Google
your
was
point of view, I'm sorry, from your point of view.
from my point of view. Google was founded by engineers, so and just true to its nature, the campus is filled with engineers. A lot of like very smart, technology-oriented people, regardless of their discipline, right? Like they're product managers, engineers, designers, and all kinds of disciplines. But everybody is really focused on technology, very smart. And it's a very laid-back campus. Everybody loves doing their work, but also it's not like a stressful or competitive environment. Yeah.
So when you say they are all very excellent workers there, where do they all come from? Where do they all come from?
Where do the people at Google?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, from all over the world. I mean, we have people moving to the Bay Area to work at Google. I personally hired people and moved them from Canada, from other parts of the US. I know there are a lot of people, my manager is from Brazil, I'm from Turkey. We all somehow ended up coming to Google to work on all the technology.
Yeah, you already said it. You originally come from Turkey. Mm-hmm. So what we love to do is Digitale Leute, and that bigger interview format is to actually understand where somebody is coming from, to understand what is important for that person, to then understand how you actually work. We believe it's very important. So it would be great if you could tell us a little bit about where you actually come from and what happened that you suddenly working in the
I grew up in Turkey, in Istanbul, and after getting a degree in architecture, I decided to go to New York to get a graduate degree. So I went to New York, and I got a master's in architecture. And until I was 23, I did not think that I was going to work in technology. But I graduated right before the dot-com bust in 1999, when people were still trying to work at internet startups, and there were a bunch of them in New York. And two of my professors had a startup, and they said, hey, do you want to come work for us? I think they offered a job to a few people from school, because when compared to technology, architects don't make a lot of money, so we were kind of cheap labor in a way. And I said, sure, I love computers, so I'm gonna take the job.
Yeah.
And once I took it, I kind of like stayed in it, and I survived the bust. I didn't lose my job, surprisingly. Many people lost their jobs, and some of them went back to their original professions, but I somehow managed to survive. And from New York, I moved to California. I worked for first a company that was doing developer software. So I was designing computer software for software developers who knew what they needed. They didn't need a designer to design for them, so that was the challenge. And then I worked for Salesforce.com for 6 years.
And let us make a break here, because what I find very interesting, and actually we talked with the head of design of Holvi yesterday, which actually also is an architect. And also went to the discipline of design. I find that very interesting. Why is that people who do architecture have some kind of attraction to design? What do you think?
It's the same thing, right? You're designing something for people, and I think architecture. You have to really think in systems, right? And computer software is better if you can think in systems as well. It's really important to understand who's going to use the software, and understanding them, what they need, and then providing them with the designs and the software that they can actually use and benefit from. I mean, one difference is obviously if you make a mistake in architecture, it's a very expensive mistake, and a lot of times you're kind of stuck with it. Whereas in software, if you make a mistake, you can fix it, and that could be a blessing or a curse, depending, right? Because that causes a lot of companies to be okay with making really significant mistakes, and their users suffer from that.
You told about your first company where you actually designed something which actually didn't need it to be designed at all. It was like they knew already what they wanted. It's like building garages, like you already know how they have to look like. There's a door at the front, and it has to be this high and this broad, and the car just can drive in it without dropping into a hole. So that sounds a little bit like it was a good entrance into designing software.
I mean, the way I learned how to design user experience is by just doing it and learning from others. Because when I started the discipline, there weren't that many school programs. There were a few master's programs and a few courses, but most of the designers were just doing and learning while they were doing. So I was a part of that generation, where we slowly learned from different disciplines, from psychology and anthropology to do research to understand, and then also we were kind of early in the days of technology or internet. We were programming some of our stuff too, so we were a little hands-on as well, and we, I basically learned it by doing. And then eventually there were more schools, and the people I hired actually get trained in user experience design. So at some point I started learning from the people who are working for me.
So when you started design, was there already user experience? Because I remember a couple of designers I interviewed before. They learned the classical way of design, like making things beautiful. When they design something, it's done. You don't touch it anymore. You just put it into life. So how was design back in your days when you learned it?
Yeah, I mean, when I started, that was the case, right? You basically the developers would build something, and then they would bring it to the designer and say, hey, can you make this pretty? Because the users can't figure this out, so help us, help them figure it out. But I was never a visual designer. I mean, there were some really talented people who could just, make something beautiful, even though it didn't quite work really well. I was more of an interaction designer. So there was all that kind of a little bit of attention, right? The developer already built it and is giving it to you to make it better. And the argument from my side or my peers' side was, hey, after you've built it, it's really hard to fix it. Just make sure that you involve the user experience team very early on. Just at the time when you have the idea that you want to build a technology, and then we can work together to design and build it. But after you build it, it doesn't really matter, right? It's as expensive to fix something after it's built than doing upfront.
So what were the first tools you actually used as a designer?
The first tool?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, what did I use?
Photoshop 5 or something like that?
I started doing designs on PowerPoint. So, I mean,
there are
that
some
was
people
my
out there
first
doing
tool.
it still.
And I was doing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? And then, like, I moved on to Balsamic, and for the longest time, I used OmniGraffle. Now there's, like, Sketch, which my team uses. Unfortunately, I stopped doing hands-on design when Sketch came out. And I'm really jealous of the designers today because the tools are so much better and easier to use than the stuff that we had to deal with before.
Yeah, back then that was actually work, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly. I mean, now like you can kind of like build something in Sketch and InVision and export it to a prototype. You don't really have to code everything. So I'm really jealous because then you can spend more time on actually solving the problem than producing the assets after the solution.
But which not always means that developing is faster because new things come up. We will talk about that later when we get to the Google part of your interview. But before that, there were steps between. So you already mentioned it was Salesforce. When did you come to Salesforce? Which year?
It was 2008.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was a designer when I joined Salesforce on the platform team. So I did, again, design a lot of tools for developers, administrators. And then I moved to the analytics team there, and I became a manager, and I built up that team. Yeah. And I left Salesforce in 2014. I worked for a skincare company for 2.5 years because I wanted to do something other than enterprise. I wanted to like see and experience how it would be to design for consumers. And after that, I joined Google about 1.5 years ago.
Yeah. You're straightforward always to Google, but I want to do all the tiny steps in between to
Yeah.
understand the process. So let's keep a little bit more to Salesforce because it's still a very important company on this world.
It is.
So let's explain a little bit how it was to work there. Was it where was it?
It was in San Francisco.
Okay.
That was great. You know, it's like in downtown San Francisco. Now I don't know, like if you read it in the kind of like Silicon Valley news, but now they built a big tower, and you know, I never worked in the tower, but yeah, like it's in San Francisco.
What kind of teams have you been working in?
So at Salesforce, they were using agile methodology. So when I joined as a designer, you know, I was a part of a Scrum team. So you know, I was working with maybe like 6 to 10 developers and QA engineers, one product manager, and like me as the designer, and we were, you know, meeting every day for stand-ups, and we would do our product planning together. Yeah, so that was kind of like how we got things done. And then Salesforce has releases 3 times a year. They are like on the calendar years in advance. So as a team, you only focus on what you need to build, and then when you're done with it, you can release it with the coming release or not.
Yeah. And was there something special at Salesforce? Is there some skill you especially learned there?
Yeah,
any learnings?
Yeah, I mean, before Salesforce, I was in smaller companies where there weren't a lot of UX people. Salesforce for me was the first time when I joined a team with you know, different kind of disciplines in user experience. There were researchers, there were designers, there were visual designers, and there were people who were more experienced than me. So it was a great learning opportunity. I learned a lot from you know, my managers there, and yeah, like it was a good experience to be a part of a bigger team than like being maybe like the only person on the UX side, or maybe being in a team of 2 or 3.
Sounds like a good preparation for Google, actually.
Exactly, where like there are many user experience people.
And you told me when we had a call that already then you were asked by Google to work for them.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. They Google tried to recruit me while I was working for Salesforce, for Google Analytics actually. But I had my kid was small then, so it was a big commute, and I didn't interview with them, but eventually I ended up there anyway.
Yeah. And you made another step between Google and Salesforce, which was actually quite important for you, as you told me. Why is that?
So after Salesforce, I said, hey, I've been in enterprise software for 15 years. I want to do something very different from enterprise. So I joined a skincare company. And very different from technology companies. They did not know what user experience was. And they hired me and said, we want you to start a UX team. So when I was hired, I had only one designer on my team. And when I left, there were 12 UX people, researchers, visual design, UX engineer, UX designers. So not only did I teach them what user experience was, and also, I guess, like, prove the value of the discipline, and also built them a team to be, building technology products.
You are head of, I believe, as a head of, it's very important to also speak business. Where did you learn that?
When I was at the skincare company, I was reporting to the VP of product. And it's really interesting, because in a larger company like Salesforce or Google, it's very easy for designers to only focus on the users, right? Like our primary job is to represent and to advocate for the users. But that also comes at the expense of not understanding business or not having an empathy for business. So at Rodan and Field, the skincare company, I reported to the VP of product, and she said, I want you to develop the user experience strategy. And while we were working on that, she really taught me how I can change the way I talked about user experience and how I could tie it into the business goals, right? Good UX design is not only about the users. It's about making users happy, but also making the business very successful. So it was very transformative for me. And when I interviewed at Google, that was one of the things, like, my product management partner was impressed with the amount of business acumen I had, which was very different from everyone else that he had talked to before. So yeah.
So maybe you can make an example. What did she tell you that you understand business?
Well, it was, it was a difference in perspective, right? When, as a designer, I was kind of looking at designs and thinking, okay, this is good design, right? Because we did user research and the users respond well. Or, hey, this is the best practice in terms of design. What she taught me was to think more about KPIs, right? How do you measure the success of design? And it's not always just by talking to 10 users in a user study. It's more about looking at metrics, right? Are you acquiring users? Are you retaining them? And when you're trying to measure those things, just basically saying, okay, the goal of this design is to make sure that our customers are happy, and this is how we are going to measure that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So finally, we're going to Google now. This topic everybody's waiting for. Yesterday, there was already a small party we had at our co-working space here in Cologne, where you also have been our guest. You had great conversation with Ben, who also is a moderator. And well, one of the sentences which really stick to me was that you said, Google is just a normal company. What did you mean by that? I mean, for me, Google is not a normal company. It's really something which is outstanding. And maybe there's some other company in China which is similar to the company Google. What did you actually mean with that?
I mean, we build product. Of course, it's at scale, and it's a huge company. It's public, very successful. But even, at Google, it's all about, making sure that we have certain goals, right? And then as the product team, design, engineering, and product management working together to make sure that we are delivering the value to our customers and users. There are a lot of things that we want to do, and just like any other company, right? Like we do not have all the resources that that will allow us to do, right? Like I'm kind of like amazed just coming to Google too. Like there's no company in the world, I think, which can say we have enough engineers and we have enough designers on the team to do everything we want to do. Like you always want more. There's always something like bigger than you can actually achieve. Yeah, that's why I was saying it's just like any other company. So you have to make choices and you have to make sure that like you're focused on the right things.
Yeah, but it's funny because people actually have the expectation that at Google, of course, you can do everything. It's like magic. You can throw money on it and solve every problem. But it seems it's not that easy. It's still people business, and we will talk about that process in a moment. So you joined Google as head of UX design, and what does that actually mean at Google?
So at Google, it's interesting. Like every team works a little differently, and Google has a lot of products, right? There are consumer products, and they have a different way of working. And then there are enterprise and business product teams. They work slightly different. On our team, and this is true for most of Google, we apply a model of 3 in a box. So it's always like a triangle of product manager, UX designer, and engineer. So when I joined, the reason I was hired was the head of product and head of engineering needed that, like the third head of UX partnership, so that we could all sit together and make decisions, work on our roadmap, or just basically help our teams to move forward. So I'm basically a partner to engineering and product.
So you are at Google Analytics. Usually people are working for products which are, let's say, not that old, not that big, not used by so many people than Google Analytics. Maybe you can give us a little bit a feeling of the dimensions we are talking about. Yeah. So how huge is that product?
Every day, Google Analytics processes 500 billion digital moments across different devices. 500 billion. It's like that's the size of it. Every day, 500 billion moments are being processed.
I don't even know how many zeros that are.
Yeah, exactly. And it's websites and apps and all kinds of moments that are happening on the internet. Yeah.
And tell us something about the customers. How broad is the customer?
There are big enterprises using Google Analytics, right? And those enterprises might have data scientists and but also business people who are looking at Google Analytics. But we also have like small businesses, right? Or not even businesses. I know a lot of designers who actually use Google Analytics to measure the success of their portfolio websites. When they update their portfolio site, there are a lot of bloggers who are just writing blogs, and they're using Google Analytics to evaluate. So it's like from that one person, it's not even a business, right? Like having a portfolio website to
Even I use Google Analytics for my blog. Even I use Google Analytics for my blog.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a wide range of people, and some of them are very data savvy. They understand when they look at the reports, they understand how to analyze the data and get insights. And then a lot of them, they are very new to it, and they don't necessarily always know what they should be looking at.
So there are huge companies using it. There are single persons using it for their hobby to monitor some stuff they're doing. How do you design a user interface for such a broad audience for so many people?
Yeah. So we kind of like look at it from a, feature by feature basis, right? For example, recently we've been pushing out something we call intelligence, where you ask a natural language question, right? Like how many people visited my website from Germany last week? You can ask that question and get an answer. And when we are designing something like that, what we say is, hey, this is primarily for people who do not know how to go into an analytics product and then like choose the metrics and dimensions, and it's easy for them to ask that question. So that feature is really for them. The data scientists, they like it, but they're also saying, yeah, this is great for the newbies in my organization, but it's not for me, which is fine. And then there are other tools. For example, like for premium customers, we released advanced analysis, which is an advanced tool that's more for data, savvy people that can go in there, and it's a drag and drop tool where you can really analyze the data. But we don't expect your blogger, unless they are very data savvy, to be able to go in there and use it comfortably. So we just take it from a feature by feature basis.
And how do you structure your customers?
So my team, we have developed personas. We base our designs and choices by personas. So when product management says, hey, we want to build this new feature, we have a conversation with them and say, okay, even though we expect everyone, a very wide range of users to use our product, who is the primary one? And we have a discussion about that. And we have like a set of nine-ish personas that are available for the team to choose from. And that's how we focus on it.
And how do you do it, like, for example, those two features you actually described right now? So where do you put them in the interface so that the one person is not tumbling about over the complicated one, but finds the easy one he actually needs right now? How do you do that?
There are a lot of considerations that go into it, right? Because Google Analytics has been around for such a long time, and it's been basically growing incrementally over the years, and people are used to using it a certain way, and they're used to finding things where they should be. So we try to make sure that whenever we overlay a new functionality, it's very easily accessible, like the intelligence thing, right? Like there's a little icon on the top right corner. It's not in the way, but it's really easy for people to just like click on it, and then a drawer comes out, and you can ask questions and interact with it. But it doesn't interfere with your navigation or the reports that you look at on a day-to-day basis. So we try to be really careful not to disrupt the workflows of the users.
Yeah, that we come to the point which I mentioned at the beginning of the Google part. You have to considerate customers which use the tool for ages, and you want to change something.
Yep.
How do you deal with it? I guess that's something with when I was talking to Peter Sunner from Contentful, he had the same problem actually. He wanted to remove a feature because it was hindering the technical department to evolve, and he really had problems to do that because you have to deboard the customer.
Yeah.
So how do you handle that?
Yeah, I'm fairly new with the team. I've been on the team for 1.5 years, and so far, like, we haven't done anything radical. But I know, for example, there was like something that was in a like beta mode for a specific set of customers that they had out for a while. It's not an important feature, but what they did was to disable. It wasn't being used that much, but there was a lot of communication to those customers who were using it, right? Like, we have to be really careful. And then, my thinking is, if we want to change something radically, we'd better be like really confident that it's going to make the customers' lives better. Because like even when you make small changes, some people get really mad because they've automatically memorized where everything is, and you move the order of 2 things, and a lot of people are like, hey, like I can't find this feature anymore, right? Even though it's right there, maybe like a little bit away from where it used to be. So you have to be careful and then guide them with a lot of like hand-holding and documentation and communication. We try to guide them to adjust to whatever the new way of doing things.
But doesn't that also means that you are not able to stay innovative anymore? There's one example I want to bring. Actually, here in Cologne, there's a company called the DeepL, which is doing an excellent job actually of translating stuff. So good that people all over the world don't use Google Translate anymore, but DeepL. So this is something what, of course, can happen even to Google, which have so much power and can develop so much. So how do you stay innovative?
Let's see.
maybe
we are so. Obviously, like we are kind of like thinking about the future of our product, right? Like with product managers and engineers and UX, while we are doing like a lot of kind of incremental changes, like there's also that vision of, hey, where do we want to be, 3-4 years from now, and what is changing around us? We talk to our customers. We, there's market research and user research. There's a lot of conversations with Google partners, and we try to understand, okay, what is it that marketers around the world are looking for that we are not necessarily providing yet, and how can we get there, right? Or anticipating what might happen in the future, and then just providing some value.
You recently introduced the new feature that you can actually ask Google Analytics.
Yeah, exactly. Like nobody was telling us, hey, we need to be able to ask this question to Google and get an answer, right? And we anticipate that, hey, if we give that, then like we are basically making Google Analytics and insights more accessible to people who do not have the expertise to use an analytics tool. So we try to kind of like balance the incremental additions with those kinds of value adds.
The audience might probably ask themselves right now, can I now open Google Analytics and say, hey Google, please give me the stats for my website of last week. Unfortunately, that's not there yet. It's conversational in a different way. Maybe you want to explain that a little bit.
I mean, yeah, like that's I think that would be the next natural step, right? Yeah. Google, like, we are kind of like looking at the assistant team, right? Like they're a totally separate team than like the team we are in, but they're leading the way in consumer space. And like that's one of the values that Google Analytics has. Like we kind of like have access to them, and we are able to work with them to kind of think about, okay, like how can we integrate those kinds of features into Google Analytics.
And where do you actually ask that question you said? Where do you put it in Google Analytics?
You mean the question that you're saying?
Yeah,
you could. Like you could type it, right?
Okay,
but there's no, like, I mean, you can ask the question, like, how many people visited my website from Germany, or, and then you can ask a follow-up question, right? How many of them were from, France, and you can do those, but of course, like you can't do it on your Google Home yet.
Yeah,
right?
unfortunately. That's something
it would be great, right? Like if you woke up in the morning and then like said, okay, Google, tell me how many people visited my website last night.
Yeah,
that would be awesome.
Right now.
Well, right now you just have to.
You can do that easily at Google. Come on, you have all the power.
You can open, you can use your mobile app and like dictate it to your mobile app. Yeah.
Before we start our questioning, you can There will be questions from you, and please think about them right now, because at any moment you can ask any question you would like to ask Beril, head of UX from Google Analytics. And one important part of our interviews is always tools, tactics, and methods. We talked a little bit about methods, but not so much about tools. At the beginning we said you used old Photoshop stuff and like that, and today everybody is using Sketch. So, but the most interesting question is, of course, how is the team of Google Analytics measuring Google Analytics?
Well, we do use Google Analytics, right?
So you use Google Analytics to analyze the action on Google Analytics.
Well, yeah, because we also want to use our tool to make sure, that like we are building the right stuff. I mean, we do have data scientists on our team who also kind of like go deeper into the data. We do a lot of user research with our users. We have feedback mechanisms. So we don't only look at the data, we also combine that with a lot of qualitative research, because data shows you what's going on, but it doesn't really tell you why that's happening. And that's really the critical part from a UX point of view. We want to understand why people are not using a specific feature. Is it because they can't find it? Is it because they don't understand how to use it? And then once we understand those, then we can kind of make improvements or changes to what we are building.
What other tools do you personally use? What is very important to you?
Oh my God. Well, I'm a manager, right? Like,
yeah.
my biggest tools are email, and
let me guess, you're using Gmail?
Yeah, Gmail at Google. Yeah, we use Google, the Google Suite, right? Like Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Presentation. So like that's the majority of where I live. And then of course, like my team uses Sketch, InVision, and then I basically have those as well, because sometimes I just like open SketchUp to put together something. But usually, I'm just reviewing what they're doing rather than designing.
That you at Google use Google tools is absolutely clear.
Absolutely.
What's really interesting is, do you actually use tools not from Google, like Microsoft products, some other products, especially in the analytics part?
No, not really. I mean, we are really like mostly using Google tools from an office point of view. Google has like all the necessary office tools, right? And then from a design point of view, there are some internal design tools because, again, like I think like early on there was a mention of the 20% time. There were a lot of 20% projects by designers, UX people who built tools for themselves because they had a need. So there's some like that, but we also used a lot of the really common like Photoshop and Sketch, InVision, that every designer out there is using, those tools,
I'm pretty sure a lot of people in the audience have a wish list of things they want to change at Google Analytics. What is your favorite change you would like to see in Google Analytics? Where do you say, since I joined Google Analytics, this is something I'm really working on to have it changed?
I think like the intelligence stuff is like really the stuff that I'm really excited about, because I think everything else is like very like typical kind of like analytics driven stuff, right? Like there are a lot of different products out there that are also doing similar things, but bringing intelligence in and making it more accessible to business users or to mom and pop shops, I think that's like really exciting. And that work started before I joined, but that's one focus area that I'm passionate about, and we will continue working on it and making it even better in the future.
Sweet. My last question, actually, before you guys can join us with other questions, which is from our experience we made at all the meetups we organized before the summit to practice a little bit. You have the better questions, actually. So please ask them in a minute. My last question for you is, you are a manager, you are a team lead, you have to be a leading example, you're the head of. Give us 3 tips for being a good team lead. What do you think is essential for being a good team lead? What is important for you as a person, as a leader?
Yeah.
What features do you have?
Yeah, I basically hire. I really care most about attitude. I try to hire people who are nice, who are collaborative, and who want to learn. I don't really care that much about like how skilled they are, because like good design skills can be improved upon and they can be taught, but like no brilliant jerks. Like I've had instances where like someone with a bad attitude on the team, or someone who was kind of like the star, but like was really mean to the rest of the team, can really destroy the culture of the team and also the quality of the work that's being done. So it's really important for me to have a team where like everybody is collaborating with each other, and they're trying to help each other and trying to make each other successful. So that's number one, I think. And then I'm fairly hands off. Like I basically say, hey, I hire really talented and smart people, and I try to not get in their way. And it's really hard for design managers at the beginning, when they first become managers, to not like say anything most of the time, because I still do. Sometimes like I look at a design and I say, oh my God, I would have done it so much better. But it's really important not to say that. Asking questions, guiding or challenging, that's great. But you don't want to stifle the process, the thought process that your team is going through. It's really important for them to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes, and eventually come up with a great design for the users.
2 and 3? Oh my God.
What's the 3? Oh, that's a hard one. And I think like this is an advice to product and technology people, right? UX is a newer discipline than, it's been around for 20 plus years, but it's newer than engineering. Engineering is the oldest one, then the product managers came, and then UX came. It's really important to involve the UX team early on in the process. Don't wait until you've decided what product to build, because that's too late, right? You have a little idea, start talking to the UX designer and start ideating, let them ask questions. Because once the idea is fleshed out by engineering and product, it's really hard for the UX team to make any impact, right? Because the product is already designed at that point. And all you're doing is putting on some makeup and like designing some flows, but it's not always the best solution.
Hi, my name is Anna. I'm a UX consultant in e-commerce. And first of all, I want to thank you for coming over to Germany and giving us insights. My question is about the little thing that all users see when using Google Analytics. It's the gray loading bar. Every time I see it and the world freezes, I think how many people are sitting in front of it, and I wonder if there was a research project about it yet to increase the joy of use or give some learning, or if you don't, by intention, design around that to interrupt the process of the people. So
which part you mean?
So the gray loading bar.
Oh, the gray login bar.
I'm sitting in front of it. I always think, how could I use the time when waiting for the data more better?
Yep.
So I was thinking, could Google Analytics make this more fun? Like give an insight about Google Analytics, or have an Easter egg, make it more beautiful.
I know, I want to change that too. So this is the, it's a data tool, right? Like, and it's been around for 15 years, I think, at this point. I think like maybe Google made it a web-based tool like in 2004 or 5, something like that. So there are a lot of parts of it that are in a way outdated, like that have been built before. And it's just like a matter of how do we get back to it. But I agree with you. That's something that we would like to change. Sometimes it becomes a negotiation between the engineering team and the UX team, right? Like you go in there and you say, hey, we really need to improve this. This is not an acceptable user experience. And then the engineering says, well, like it's going to take us 6 months to fix that. Do you want that or do you want something else, right? So, with legacy, like with older tools that have been developed over the years, sometimes like it's not that the team doesn't want to do it. It's a matter of like choices or timing to fix those things. But I agree. I mean, every time I see it too, I'm like, oh, we need a better way to do it, right? And it's not just the UX too. I think we challenge the engineers as well. Speed it up, please. Don't make it so slow to load, for example. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Here's another question in the front row. I think we will have about 2 or 3 further questions.
Your name and your role before, please.
Hi, I'm Limor. I'm a product owner of mobile apps in Groninger. First of all, thank you. I found it really, really inspiring and interesting. And my question is, what do you want to be when you will be a grown-up? Do you want to stay with UX, or do you think of going to product, or like, how does your future looks like?
I know, right? Like I actually have been thinking about that recently as well. I think for a little while I want to stay with user experience, but I think just like eventually, like if I manage to rise up in the ranks, right? You eventually become like a product leader. Like it's almost like UX and product kind of like merge, just like with UX too, like there are researchers, there are designers, but when you rise in UX to the leadership position, your background could be either. So I think like I personally would like to see a lot more UX people go into product management, right, to product leadership, because there's like a different perspective that the discipline of product management could gain from people who come from a very user-focused, very design-oriented discipline.
Thank you very much. And another question right next to Limor.
Who are you and what do you do?
Hi, I'm Maya. I'm a product manager from SAP. And I have a question. So as a product manager, there's always this discussion with the UX team. Do we improve the design of an existing feature or do we go for a new feature? And I'm always trying to push for new features. So how do you persuade product managers to invest in design of features that are already out there?
Yeah. I mean, in my case, right, like showing the numbers is a great way to do it, right? I think like some way for a UX designer to convince product management is to show that like a feature needs to be redesigned because like it's maybe costing the company in terms of opportunity, right? Like you could argue, hey, this feature is what drives, like our revenue numbers up. And if we made it better, we could maybe multiply that revenue number by 2. And also on the flip side, like for a mature product, it's, sometimes like UX people have to say, you know what, like this is not worth redesigning, right? Like, so it goes both ways. And sometimes it's just like good for the general user experience because you have to take a step back at times and redesign a part of your product to modernize it. And then so that like you don't get questions like, hey, why is the loading bar so ugly, right? I mean, it's not really stopping anyone from using Google Analytics, but it does leave an impression with your users, which also is an important part of your product's kind of like general popularity or how people use it.
And I would say this is a wrap. Thank you very much,
Thank
Beril.
you.
Thanks
Thank you
again.
for having
Big round
me.
of applause for her. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have
Thank
you.
you.
Awesome insight.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me.